Hi, welcome to my Starbow Macromechanics video. Currently in StarCraft 2, macromechanics are a really big point of discussion. Some of the community wants macromechanics to be removed and some of them want them to stay. As for myself, I think macromechanics should stay. I think they're actually a good part of RTS. I just think that the current version in StarCraft Heart of the Swarm should be readjusted and re-implemented. And I think a good game that actually takes macromechanics and does them well is Starbow. And so today I want to talk about Protoss, Terran, and Zerg macromechanics. And I think the end point is I hope StarCraft 2 can get some inspiration from this video and from these ideas and really be able to get something that works and satisfies most of the community. So without further ado, I'd like to talk about Protoss. So here I've got your typical Protoss base with your 3 Nexuses in the main. I'm just kidding, that's not actually standard. So the first thing that I want to look at is if you look at the Nexus, you don't actually have instant access to Chrono Boost. And this goes for all races. You don't start off with Overcharge or Nurturing Swarm or Inject and all these abilities I'm going to talk about today. But rather, if you go over here and you scroll over here, the first thing you notice is that this upgrade actually costs gas. So now, it forces players to really think strategically about whether or not they want to just get their macro booster right away, or whether or not they might as well just get another base. And I think that by tweaking the economy, the way that it works in Starbow and Brood War is that the more bases you have, your income is going to be significantly higher. So for example, if you have 36 workers compared to a player who has 40 workers, if the person who has 36 workers have 3 bases, they're going to have 12 workers per base. Whereas if you had someone who had 40 workers on 2 bases, they would have 20 workers per base. But the person who has 36 workers, despite having 4 less workers, will probably have an income that is significantly higher. I would say probably something like 1,200 income higher. So by changing the economy and then implementing the system where you have to get gas to get your macro mechanics, it might actually just be better just to get another expansion before investing in these macro boosters. And one philosophy that Starbow takes when implementing macro mechanics is they want to make macro mechanics very spammable and not have a very huge effect in the game. So what this means that in order to really pay off with your macro boosters, you have to use them constantly. If you look over here at this upgraded Nexus, and you look at the energy cap, it's only 50 energy, which is really, really low. And if you look at all these energy spells, it costs 15 energy, 40, and this, which costs a cooldown, that I'll talk about later. And then another thing that I do like about macro boosters, and this is the main important thing, is that it actually promotes something called base management. So in Brood War, if you go back, you would notice that there is no multiple building selection and there is no auto mine. So this forces players to have to go back to each individual one of their buildings and actually build the unit one by one, just as I'm doing right now. Because StarCraft 2 uses multiple building selection, you can simply hotkey all your buildings into one group and just spam a button to get your units out, which is exactly what I'm doing. And that, although it does leave a lot more APM to be utilized for micro, it really kind of makes all StarCraft 2 players look the same. You basically see all the top Terran players having all excellent micro against banelings such as Marine splits. But in Brood War, you had players who were able to distinguish themselves just by their playstyles. For example, you had players such as ILUVUV or Flash, who were very well known for their macro, but not so much for micro. And then you had players like Boxer, who didn't exactly have the best macro around, but they had excellent micro. And that's what made StarCraft Brood War players so interesting, is that they had such different personalities and different playstyles. And because there was no multiple building selection and there was more base management, you could see those playstyles. So finally, let's go back into these actual macro boosters and macro mechanics. So if you look at the Nexus over here, that has been upgraded with the Kaitaran Citadel, you have your typical Chrono Boost. Now, one thing in StarCraft, in Starbow I should say, is that there's actually spells and macro boosters that kind of have hybrid abilities, and Chrono Boost is going to be the first one that I'm going to talk about. First off, I'm going to build 2 cannons here, and I'm going to get back to these later on. Yep. So, Chrono Boost works just like it does in a regular StarCraft 2, and it's the same thing that it works in Starbow. But the difference is that duration of the actual chron boost is it's very spammable. So if you look at this, it only lasts for 19 seconds. So you're having to go back and forth to all your buildings every 19 seconds just to use another chron booster. So here we have the actual chron boost. I've got these two gateways, both building zealots. Although I started this zealot earlier, I'm going to chron boost this one, and this zealot should come out first. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So, going back to these cannons, there's actually another ability attached to Chrono Boost that makes it pretty interesting. So if you look at the tooltip, it says, while in the state, the structure will train, research, and attack at a faster rate. So Chrono Boost is very versatile. Not only does it work on any production facility, it can also be used on research. So I can start using this Arbiter Tribunal to start researching recall for this Arbiter over here. And then lastly, the one cool thing about Chrono Boost is that it'll actually allow cannons to attack more quickly. So if you see these two cannons here, I'm going to have one cannon attack this pod, and another cannon attack the other pylon. And I'm going to Chrono Boost this cannon. And look how much faster it attacks. And I think this is a great alternative to something such as the Mothership Core, because now you're actually strategically thinking about whether or not you want to Chrono Boost out army, if you want to produce more probes, or if you want to use Chrono Boost for your cannons for defense. So there's a lot more strategic thinking rather than just point and click with the Mothership Core. And I think that's great about Chrono Boost. So that's Chrono Boost, and now I want to move on to something called Rift. Now, Rift is an ability that basically allows you to move some units out, attack, do whatever you want, and you can rift them back home. So if you look at the tooltip, you're able to recall 5 ground units. So I'm going to recall these zealots and that dragoon. And if you look over here, they'll now be recalled towards some space. But the thing is, the units aren't actually vulnerable. So if I were to take this zealot, and actually, let's try this. So I'm going to have this sentinel attacking the zealot, and I'm going to recall or rift back home this one zealot. But while being rifting, this zealot will still be taking damage. So it's not just something that's an instant, safe recall back home. There is that little delay that still leaves your units vulnerable, and the units that you're recalling also aren't able to attack. So that's Rift, and I think it's a great addition. It also costs more energy than Chrono Boost. And it's particularly useful for something such as Reaver drops. Let's just say that you're using a Warp Prism to hold a Reaver, or it's similar to a Disruptor. So let's just say you have like a Warp Prism holding a Disruptor, and you lose the Warp Prism, but you don't want to lose the Disruptor. Now for expensive energy cost, you can rift back home that Disruptor and bring it back home and keep it safe. FYI, Disruptors aren't actually in Starbow because basically the Reaver is almost identical. Now the last ability I want to talk about is this ability right here, which is called Energized Pylon. Now if you played Root War, you may be familiar with shield batteries, and that's exactly what this ability is going to do. However, it works a little bit more conveniently because what you do is you simply energize a pylon and it works on an 80-second cooldown. So what you do is you bring a unit into this energy field and it'll be recharged. So I'm going to take this Dark Archon here and I'm just going to use Mind Control on this SCV. And the reason being is because it's going to actually lose all its shields. So I'm going to bring this Archon back into this pylon. And look at that. It heals right away. And this could be really useful for something such as the Archon, which is primarily shields. So going over here, I have these scouts, and Energized Pylon also works on air units. So I'm going to attack into these buildings, and it looks like that's just too much firepower. So I'm just going to back up. Back up. And now I'm going to use a Nexus to energize this pylon. And you're going to see that these units are going to be recharging their shields. One at a time, of course. Yeah, those scouts want to die. That scout wants to die too. And you can also click to, if you want to put priority on a unit. Right now, the current implementation is that it is on autocast, but this may or may not be changed. But as of now, I think the abilities for the Nexus are all in an excellent condition. I think they're really great, and they add a lot to the game. So now, I like to move on to Terran, which is my third race, and the race that I play. So, here we've got your typical command center that hasn't been morphed into an orbital command. And once again, you have call down SCV, which is going to be the replacement for call down mules. Now this is your standard typical SCV. SCV. Oh, I don't have enough supply. So as I was saying, this is going to be your typical SCV. You call it down. It costs 50 minerals to cast, and it also costs 25 energy. And keep this in mind that all these energy costs here are different. So, call down SCV costs 25, and overcharge costs 15, but I'll talk about overcharge later on. So, I'm going to go ahead and call down an SCV here. And it's just a regular, standard SCV. But it does come with a little caveat. So, I'm gonna scan over here, and I'm going to drop an SCV here. So once the scanning is gone, the SCV doesn't actually have vision. And if you notice, there was actually a period in which the siege tanks weren't attacking the SCV. So let me explain. So what happens is when you first call down the SCV doesn't take aggro unless the enemy commands a unit to attack it. And also, meanwhile, while the SCV is in that non-aggro phase, it doesn't have any vision until after that phase is over. So once again, I'm going to scan this side, and I'm going to drop an SCV here. But now, I'm going to use this to issue an attack to kill the SCV. That way, the siege tanks aren't aggroing on the vultures and killing them off. So, that's called an SCV. If you call it down on a mineral field, it'll automatically start mining just as it would. And it also is very versatile because you can use this to obviously. Oh, and one thing is you can actually cast it in a vision where in a place where you don't have vision. So obviously this could be quite useful because you can drop it down and use them to repair, or you can even use them to drop down and build buildings. So it's a very versatile spell, but obviously it does cut into your overcharge production. And yeah, it costs a lot of energy, and it also costs minerals, and operates on a cooldown as well. Now, Overcharge doesn't have a cooldown. It simply costs 15 energy. And Overcharge is a pretty special, pretty awesome ability. So as I mentioned before, Starbow has some hybrid abilities, and this is one ability that does have some hybrid effects. So first things first, if you look at the tooltip, it says, overcharges the targeted production facility for 19 seconds. A factory or starport will produce units at a 50% faster rate, while a barracks will produce units at a 100% faster rate. So if you look over here, I'm going to build some Goliaths. So I'm building 2 Goliaths here, and I'm going to overcharge this factory, so you can see that it noticeably produces faster. Over here, I'm going to produce 2. Oh. Gotta kill some. Gotta get some SCVs. It's a bad day to be an SCV. So over here, I'm gonna build. Let's build some mercs. So I'm gonna build 2 mercs here, and you're gonna see that overcharge makes it produce much more quickly. So yes, barracks units produce at a 100% faster rate, twice as fast as if you were to make units from the starport. So for example, I can also make, let's say, science vessels. Oh, I can't make any science vessels because I'm out of. Okay, well we'll just kill some units here. And that's the poor Banshee. Okay, so I'll build 2 science vessels, and I can overcharge 1. It doesn't produce as quickly as the barracks did, but still noticeably faster. And I'm gonna get some water to clear my throat. So now, the really awesome cool thing about overcharge is the hybrid effect. So keep in mind you can't actually cast overcharge on a building that's floating. So as you can see, I can't actually cast it on this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cast overcharge on one of these factories, and I'm going to lift both of them off, and you're going to see how awesome they really are. Isn't that so cool or what? That's so cool. That's right. Now you can even overcharge buildings, lift them off, and make them move faster. But unfortunately, overcharge doesn't actually work on command centers or orbital command centers. So keep that in mind. Also, overcharge isn't as versatile as Chrono Boost is. Chrono Boost can be used on research facilities, can be used to get research upgrades, to get your attack upgrades. Overcharge can only be used for production. So we do have some asymmetry, but at the same time, Macromechanics are still balanced as far as we've seen with the testing that I've seen. I'm not a Starbow developer, by the way, I'm just a player. As far as I've seen, games have been really balanced, and it hasn't been associated with macro boosters, at least not yet. Maybe with some further testing, we may be able to see that. Maybe it comes down to macro boosters being a little bit too overpowered, but so far we haven't seen that. In fact, we've even seen pro players disregard Macromechanics completely, especially while using Zerg, and still coming out on top, doing just as fine, if not maybe slightly worse. So that's overcharge. And finally, we have scanner sweep. So if you look over here, you can notice that there's a number 2 by the scanner sweep. And that's because you can actually hold 2 scans per orbital command center. So one complaint about scanning in StarCraft 2 was that it's very costly, because whenever you scan, you lose a potential meal. Fortunately though, scanning doesn't actually cost energy, so every scan you use doesn't cut into your production. However, you're only limited to 2, and they operate on a cooldown. So as you can see, it's a 65-second cooldown. I can scan twice, and that's it. It'll go on cooldown. Now, you might be wondering, if I were to scan one time, wait for a period of time, then yes, the second cooldown, the second scan is also being reloaded as the cooldown is still applying. So for example, I can cast right here, and let's just say that's been about 5 seconds. I'll scan again, and you can already see that it already has progressed in the cooldown. So that's cool. That's scanner sweep. And finally, we're going to move on to Zerg. So Zerg's macromechanics are in the form of queens, and you're basically familiar with most of the abilities. Now, if you look at the queen though, first of all, it doesn't actually have access to an attack. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an attack. It does actually have an attack, but it's on activation, and I'll explain more about that later. So, first off, let's go ahead and bring our queens over here. And we'll talk about the first ability, which is Larva Inject. Now, Larva Inject in StarCraft 2 obviously spawns you a lot of larvae. Here in Starbow, it only spawns you 1 larva, but look at this. It only lasts 10 seconds. So you're constantly spamming these inject larvas over and over and over again, and you get 1 extra larva. Or maybe I'll inject over here, so you can see it more clearly. So after 10 seconds, a larva pops up, and you got 1 extra larva. A lucky day to be a larva. Next, we're going to move on to creep tumors. Now, if you compare the energy cost of inject larvae costs 15 energy, while creep tumors cost 30 energy. And the reason being is because creep in Starbow does provide vision, but Starbow and Brood War they don't have as much emphasis in micro as you see in StarCraft 2, but more so on unit positioning. And so obviously scanning, vision, and all sorts of that play a really big role because unit positioning is so important. So creep tumors actually cost more energy to make you think more strategically about them, about whether or not you actually want to inject larva or try to get some more vision. Keep in mind that units on creep do not get a speed bonus, in Starbow. They move just as fast on and off creep. So that's creep spread. Obviously, you can still spawn another creep tumor from itself, one time only. And that's inject larva. So the last macro mechanic, I should say, is something called Nurturing Swarm. Now this energy cost is actually 40 energy, so it's the most out of all the Queen's abilities. So what this does is, this is the hybrid ability of Zerg. So if you look at the tooltip, it says, releases a cloud of nurturing insects at a targeted biological unit or structure, restoring 110 hit points to the target. So obviously, if we have something that's injured, so I'll take this Eruptor, Starbow exclusive, and I'm going to attack this Viper here. So. Oh, and also, just in case you're wondering, it's not as strong as you think it is, okay? That's more of a zoning unit. But anyways, I can use Nurturing Swarm on top of this Viper and restore its HP. Same thing with the building. So I'm gonna take this nice network, and I'm gonna have these Guardians attack it. Oh. Alright. So this building has taken some damage. I'm gonna take a Queen, and I'm gonna use Nurturing Swarm on it. And it's going to regen its HP. Okay. Now, the hybrid ability, though, of Nurturing Swarm, which makes it so cool, and gives it a lot of flexibility, is by sacrificing 40 energy, you're now able to morph in buildings more quickly than I'm morphing in. So let's just say that I'm morphing in this layer, and let's just say that I want to hit a really nasty muta timing. I'm going to morph in these two layers. I'll use Nurturing Swarm on one of them. And as you can see, this building is morphing in a lot more quickly. Oh. So you can even get faster defense. Okay. So the last ability of the Queen isn't really a macro mechanic, but more of a temporary defense. So this last ability is called Enrage Queen. So it's got a cooldown of 38 seconds. It enrages the Queen, allowing her to attack for 22 seconds. She deals 7 melee damage in a small splash arc in front of her, with an attack period of 1, aka attack speed. So I'm gonna get some enemy units to attack over here. And I got some more units coming in too. So, I'm gonna bring some vultures here to attack, and I'm gonna establish these bunkers. So these poor SCVs are about to die. And now I can enrage. And if you notice, it actually has some splash. So it looks like that Queen might actually die, so I'll get a little extra boost here. This is a Devourer ability that allows you to basically zone out the damage here. But uh-oh, look at this. My Enrage is actually on a cooldown, so now I can't attack with this Queen. So that's Blight. It just basically does a small, a low amount of damage in an area, just mainly for zoning. So that's the last ability of the Queen. And it also promotes more base management, so you don't just have your Queens on auto-attacking or something. You have to actually go to them and issue the attack command by enraging them first. And this is also similar to the Planetary Fortress, which is going to be the last thing I want to show. So I have this Planetary Fortress here, and I have some units attack. So as you notice, it's not actually doing anything until I actually activate the cannons. And then it'll take off all these units here. So yeah, that's my Starbow Macromechanics video in a nutshell. Not really a nutshell, but thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just leave them in the comments section, and I'll be sure to get back to them as soon as I can. And that's the end of it. Thanks for watching. Take care.